Hi everyone, welcome to week 6. We're going to be looking at interrogative pronouns this week. All right, so we're going to look at relative pronouns to begin with, something that you should already know from last year, so we have a little bit of a refresh. But interrogatives are based on those forms, they're similar to them. We're going to look at how questions are asked in English, and then forms of the interrogative and cases of the interrogative. All right, so here's your relative pronoun. Again, this should look familiar from last year. Basically, we have a Q/QU as a stem. All right, and it's a bit of a mishmash of 212 and third declension endings. So you can see the EM, which is of course third declension, the AM, which is of course first declension. All right, the ORM, which is 212, and then the EBUS, which is third. So I won't go through all the examples of that, but the interrogative pronoun is going to be based on the forms of the relative pronoun. A lot of these forms are going to be the same. Not all of them, but most of them. All right. The problem with the relative pronoun, the difficulty with the relative pronoun, and this will apply to the interrogative pronoun as well, is that they both come at the beginning of their clause no matter what their grammatical function. What that means is that you can have a direct object coming first in the sentence. You can have an ablative coming first in the sentence. English doesn't love this, right? English likes to have its subject come first and then build from there. Good news is there's a readily accessible example where this happens fairly regularly, and that is Yoda, the Star Wars character. So the top line here is Yoda kind of speaking. The bottom line is a non-Yoda person speaking. This is from a Pepsi commercial from, I think, the 90s that I sort of dug up. So everything is color-coded. The yellow is the direct object, the blue is the subject, and the green is the verb. All right, it is not normal. It is not the way we would speak, but it is understandable, right? That cheeseburger you do not want. And no, I'm not going to do a Yoda voice. I do not want that cheeseburger, the more conventional way of phrasing it. So the Yoda version, that cheeseburger you do not want, is to some extent how the relative pronoun and interrogative pronoun version would go, because again, they have to come at the beginning of their clause. So if they are accusative, if they are the direct object, they will come at the beginning of the clause, even though we wouldn't expect them to be there. Your drink desire you not. The Diet Pepsi I do want. And note that the non-Yoda character actually maintains that kind of Yoda word order with the direct object at the beginning. But it is still, as I said, understandable. So keep these examples in mind as we go through. All right, one more, slightly more official example. John Milton is a fairly famous English poet from the Baroque era, 17th century. And this is from his poem Paradise Lost. All right, so him followed his next mate, and I always ask my students who followed whom. All right, the trick is, of course, is that his next mate followed him. Next mate is the subject, him is the direct object. John Milton as a poet, really John Milton as an English speaker, it's safe to say probably would know that him can't be the subject of the verb because English pronouns change their forms to indicate function. He is the subject, him is the direct object. Milton knows, on the basis of Latin, that he can begin his sentence with an accusative or an objective form, and the reader will know that it is not the subject based on that form. So in more conventional English, this sentence would read, of course, his next mate followed him. All right. So there are examples in English of word order that is slightly convoluted and that we're still able to make sense of. The relatives and the interrogatives will put that to the test as well. All right. So this is on relative pronouns, but again, they're very similar to interrogatives and will apply. All right. So basically, you're just choosing from the words in parentheses to complete the sentence. All right. I will do 2 of them, and then I'll let the other two. I'll leave the other 2 for you. All right. So of course, he went home. He's the subject. We wouldn't say him went home. And then, of course, the boy who was tired. Note that the who is the subject of the verb was, right? It's standing for the boy. The boy was tired. And so who is going to be the correct one. All right. In number 4, all right, I went with them. We, of course, wouldn't say I went with they. All right. And then I like the people with whom I went. Note that it's the same idea, the same basic sentence, except the second version is in a relative clause. It's a relative clause version of the sentence. So because them, the objective, is used in the first one, whom, the objective is used in the second one. And again, I'll leave the other ones for her, all right? But email me if you have any questions on them. All right, so shifting to questions. This is a helpful little slide on sort of how English questions work, all right? And you have this little initials word there, all right, that let you sort of give you the pattern for how they're being, how they're structured, how English questions are structured. So you've got a question word, all right, and then you've got your helping verb. There's always going to be a helping verb in a question. Could be was, could be were, something like that. In this case, it's did. Then the subject, then the main verb. All right, now, the trick is what we are doing here, all right, what we're learning here, isn't going to use these kinds of words because those are adverbs. It's going to use pronouns, all right? So if you've got a subject, you're going to have something like, whom did they, no, that's not going to work. Whom did they see? All right? Whom did you write? And what you can see, all right, is that these are both objective pronouns, objective interrogative pronouns, because we have a subject already, all right? The objective interrogative pronoun is indicated by that M, right, versus the subject, which would just be who, and then you'll have a subject after it. In a non-objective question, so let's say I went, who went, you know, to the party, something like that, all right? Note that you've just got your subject and your verb, all right? You go right from pronoun into verb. With an objective pronoun, interrogative pronoun, you'll have a noun in between that and the verb. So remember, in the subjective one, who went, subject, then verb, all right? In the objective one, you've got subject, pronoun, interrogative pronoun, whom, and then the subject in between. So that's just a good way to check whether or not you're translating correctly and whether or not you're dealing with a subjective or an objective one. Let's take a look at Latin. All right. So here's a good handy little chart of sort of the different Latin interrogative pronouns and what they mean. And you can see the kinds of words that we're dealing with. Again, many of these overlap with the relative pronoun. The W words in English are to some extent the Q words in Latin. Not all of them work. Like what doesn't really work as a relative pronoun. All right. Go through there. And this is the basic declension of them as well. We'll see a bigger chart on the next slide or the one after that. You'll note a couple things. Masculine and feminine are combined. All right, so masculine and feminine share the same forms, basically because when you're asking a question, you don't necessarily know whether the answer is going to be a masculine or a feminine, so you can't and really shouldn't specify that. Neuter has its own forms. Just from this quick glance, you can see that a lot of these forms are going to be similar to the relative pronoun. Quis, of course, is an exception, as is quid, but everything else will be pretty much the same. Quid, of course, is the same in the nominative and the accusative because it is neuter. All right, so here they are laid out a little more clearly, and you can see that masculine and feminine are the same. All right, and then neuter has basically the same forms, but a few slight differences. All right, the singular is slightly different from relative pronouns. The plural is exactly the same as relative pronouns. I'll make that bracket a little better. All right, so the singular is slightly different. The plural is exactly the same as relative pronouns. You'll see the plural does divide by all three genders, but plural is much less commonly used. Most interrogative pronouns will be in the singular. All right, so these are the forms. You'll obviously have to know them, but you should have a head start given that they are based on the relative pronoun. And here's just a little text sheet that I wrote up about sort of how the interrogative pronoun works. I'm not going to go through the whole thing for you. A lot of it covers what we've already talked about, but you can sort of pause and read through that at your leisure. All right, so here's some example sentences. I couldn't eliminate number 9, so I'm just going to cross that out because it does not have an interrogative. All right, so a good bet might be one to identify the interrogative pronouns as you go through. So quorum, all right, and then they answer the question, qui, all right, and then quibus. All right, let's start with number 7 because to some extent it's the most straightforward of them all. Okay, so qui, this is going to be plural, but it's still just going to be translated who. All right, you see that germanos is accusative. So is kopios, but we have an infinitive, which hopefully will allow us to have those two accusatives relatively easily. So, qui vetuerant, veto, vetera means to forbid. So, who forbid the Germans, Germanos, all right, from bringing ducere, all of their supplies, copias integras, trans Rhenum, across the Rhine River. And that, of course, is the river, I believe, on the west coast of Germany that separates Germany from France. All right. So, who forbid, qui vetuerant, the Germans, Germanos, from bringing ducere, copias integras, all of their supplies across the Rhine River, trans Rhenum. And there's that interrogative in action. All right, let's do number 8, just going in order while we're there. All right, note that quibus is dative and ablative. And you really have no way of knowing whether quibus is dative or ablative until you understand the rest of the sentence. That's going to be purely context-based. And again, it comes at the beginning, so you need the rest of the sentence to know what it's going to be. Excuse me. Ablative tends to be more common than dative, for what that's worth. The two ways of approaching this is essentially to make a guess, but make sure to revise that guess if it doesn't work, or to kind of leave it out, translate the rest of the sentence, and then fit it in at the end once you've translated the rest of the sentence. I tend to prefer the second method myself. All right. So the good queen, bona regina, all right, ordered pecuniam, ordered is usit, pecuniam, money, dari, know that that's the passive infinitive, to be given. So the good queen ordered money to be given. Now that's the sentence version, right? But we need a question and we need to work in that quibus. All right, with a verb like give, dodare, we are likely to have a dative. So it looks like quibus is in fact dative. All right, so to whom quibus did the good queen, bona regina, order, usit, money, pecuniam, to be given. So the quibus is dative, going with dari. All right. Oh, by the way, I forgot in both 7 and 8 to translate the answer. So in 7, miseris captivis, note that is dative as well. The good queen ordered money to be given to the miserable captives or prisoners, miseris captivis. And then number 7, who forbid the Germans from bringing all of their supplies across the Rhine, Romani. So because qui is a subject, because qui is nominative, the answer is going to be nominative as well. The Romans forbid the Germans from bringing all of their supplies across the Rhine. All right, and then number 6, whose was power over Italy? Whose was the power over Italy, i.e. who controlled Italy? All right, and then the answer, a full sentence here, the power of Italy was the Romans, right? Romans apostrophe s. But note that quorum is genitive plural, as is Romanorum, to match up. All right, some other examples. We're not necessarily going to go through all of these, but they are good practice for the summatives. All right, translate the underlined word with the correct Latin form. All right, so whose is always going to be genitive. So, yeah, cuius. All right, what are you doing? What is always going to be neuter. So quid. All right, to whom, dative, with what, etc. All right. 146, identify the case, number, and use of each interrogative pronoun below. Translate the questions and their answers. And remember that you do get a clue from the answer. So quid nautis nocet, what harms the sailors? This is number 1. All right. Best to translate the answers in full sentences, just to hear them there. The wind harms the sailors. But you can clearly hear that ventus is a nominative. That means quid is a nominative as well. Remember, the neuter, quid, can be either the nominative or accusative. So if you look at number 2, quid aedificabit, casam is the answer. Casam is accusative. That will indicate that quid is accusative as well. What will he or she build? All right, quid aedificabit, what will he or she build? He or she will build a house. And then we go from there. All right, and then 147, each interrogative is a pronoun or an adjective. If it's an adjective, draw an arrow to the noun it modifies. Those forms of the interrogative can be used adjectively as well. So something like which boy, which girl, they will use the relative pronoun forms. So qui erant duces, who were the leaders. Who, that's going to be a pronoun. And then number 2, qui vir, all right, illos milites duces, which man led those soldiers. All right. That's going to be an adjective because it goes with we're. And I'm going to revise what I said before. By form alone, well, actually, qui, number one, can really be either. It can be either a pronoun or an adjective, depending on how you kind of read it. You know, which ones were leaders, who were leaders. So it can kind of go either way. And there is ambiguity, and that's fine. If there is ambiguity, then either one can be correct. All right, let's take a look at this week's summatives. Translating the questions and answers. Some of these are in the exercise from the exercise we just did. All right. So number one, what harms the sailors? The wind harms the sailors. Number two, what will he or she build? He or she will build a house. All right. Now number three, just get a new one in there. To whom will we come? We will come to you. Ad te. All right. So I'll leave the rest for you. All right, writing, translate the underlined words with the correct Latin form. So again, you're not translating the whole sentence, just the underlined forms. Remember that who